Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It's a real privilege for me to welcome all of you to the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit, and in particular to this incredibly exciting session, the CEO panel's discussion, Accelerating Progress Towards Setting Science-Based Targets. My name is Manish Apna. I'm the acting president and CEO of the World Resources Institute. And today we're delighted to have join us four incredible leaders from businesses and organizations that will be sharing their experience, their journey towards setting and implementing ambitious science-based targets. But before I introduce them, just want to lay out a few of the key questions we're going to explore in this session. We're going to talk a little bit about why embrace science-based targets, the business case for doing so. We're going to explore questions around what has their experience been so far in setting science-based targets, what's worked, what hasn't, what are some of the lessons or insights that they would like to share with all of us. And we're going to also explore the how question. How are they translating these targets into real action on the ground? How do we actually scale up science-based targets so it truly moves the needle on climate more broadly? As we talk about science-based targets, we're going to focus particularly on the Science-Based Targets Initiative. This is the leading standard for setting science-based targets. It's jointly convened by the UN Global Compact, WWF, CDP, and the World Resources Institute. And in a few short years, it's had incredible success. Climate 100 plus, CDP, the UN's business ambition for 1.5C, all call for companies to set science-based targets and recommend using SBTI. 1,500 companies have signed up for science-based targets through the SBTI initiative. And when a study was done around implementation, science-based target initiative companies reduced emissions by 6.4%. The target was only 4.2%. And that compares against an increase in non-SBTI companies of 3%. So not only are targets being set, but real reductions are being delivered. With that, let me now turn to our distinguished panel. We have Roberto Marquez, the Chief Executive Officer of Natura & Company. We have Veronica de la Cerda, the Chief Executive Officer of Triciclos. We have Francesca Starezze, Chief Executive Officer of ANEL, and we have Ms. Shabnam Siddiqui, the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network in India. We're going to ask each of them to take a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, their organizations, what they're doing. I'm then going to have a little bit of a question and answer session with each of them, and then we're going to ask them to conclude with their insight, their epiphany, their kind of one major takeaway that they'd like to share with all of you. So with that, Roberto, let me start with you. A little bit more about your journey and Natura's journey on science-based targets.
Thank you, Manish, and thank you all the panelists for the opportunity to be with all of you, and that are people also connecting and listening to this panel. It's a pleasure to be here to really discuss this very important topic about how can we collectively, help other companies in terms of bringing awareness to act with science-based targets on this very challenging endeavor to really achieve that net zero goal. Natura & Co. is a company that was founded with this notion of business that can and should be a force for good. And over the many, many years, collectively, we joined forces, started with Natura, but then joined forces with Aesop, The Body Shop, and Avon to now be more than 100 countries, reaching over 200 million customers. And really for us, the notion and how we can really drive this agenda become even more paramount last year when we set our 2030 sustainability vision, what we call commitment to life. Really focus on three pillars. And the first one, it is addressing the climate crisis, and also we'll talk about protecting the Amazon. And on this one, it's very important that we work with science-based targets to make sure that we not only understand where we are, but how we're going to get to net zero in 2030, which again is 20 years ahead of the UN goal on getting to net zero. So we're not going to be able to get there because the companies are in different stages unless we really establish very clear science-based targets and then the road in how to achieve that. The second pillar on social, we are talking about the living wage. We're talking about gender pay equality by 2023, but also to achieve 30% of underrepresented population in our management by 2030. And last but not least, the pillar that we talk about embracing circularity and regeneration, where we want to have 100% of our package in full circularity by 2030, but also over 95% of our ingredients being renewable or natural. So the point being, a lot of those very daunting targets, Manish, we still don't know exactly how we're going to get to them. But the only thing that we know is that we're going to need to really work collectively with other companies, making sure that we have the right partners, making sure that we are following science-based targets to give us a chance to actually get to those targets. So again, I think the call to action for us is we're going to need help. We needed to follow, science, and we need to follow those protocols that are important. But we're excited about the prospect, and most important, we're excited about this becoming really a call to action, not just for us, but for many, many other companies that we're going to be partnered with.
Roberto, that was incredibly inspiring. It reminded me, don't blush, but when John F. Kennedy in 1960 said we were going to put a man on the moon before the end of the decade, but had no idea how to do that. Some of your goals of what you're trying to do are similarly ambitious. Not sure how to get there, but by setting that goal, you unleash creativity and innovation in ways that are so exciting. Veronica, would love to turn to you. Triciclos, tell us a little bit more about Triciclos and your journey.
Of course. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be in this panel. I'm the smallest company here. I'm actually the CEO of Triciclos, and we work in promoting and generating a cultural change around consumption. We are current, and also how we're using our current natural resources in order to consume, right? We do so through different businesses, some of them being, and probably the oldest one where we work is through recyclable waste management. So we created these solutions where people bring their recyclables, we collect them, we pre-treat them, but at the same time, and probably this is the most important part, we educate citizens in sustainable consumption. How can they consume better? We also offer now solutions to eliminate single-use packaging with refillable solutions, returnable solutions. So trying to move a bit into other layers of circularity, understanding that there are solutions better than recycling in certain particular products. We also help other companies, and this is through our consulting services, in their pathway to becoming more sustainable, focusing very much on how to help them become more circular, creating and implementing with them and for them innovative solutions for their own products. We work with Natura, we work with other big companies here in Latin America and other spaces in the world, let's say. But it's funny because we help others arrive to their commitments, to the 1.5-degree goals, but we also are committed to the 1.5-degree goal. And it's funny, Roberto, because for us it was the same, even though we're a small company and some would say, well, this is easier for them. It's not actually. We work for the recyclable waste management solutions. It's a hard one to reduce in their emissions. And we not only committed to the science-based targets, we actually are committed to arriving to net zero by 2030. So we have a huge task ahead of us. We didn't know how to make it neither at the beginning. We are now setting up our targets. We're very focused. We're an SME. We're very focused on scopes 1 and 2. Energy. So here in Chile, we're working with Enel to understand how can we actually move away, right, from fossil fuels in terms of energy. And then, of course, in our case, it's very related to our vehicle fleet. How can we electrify it? And for us, this is a huge investment. Probably for other ones, it's not. But so we're there. We're working on that. But there's something that Roberto also mentioned. And sorry if I keep on mentioning you, but it means he talked about collectiveness, about collaboration. So for us, it's extremely important to collaborate with our providers, our suppliers that are super small suppliers, and that you need to educate them. You need to make them understand why this is relevant, why this is important, and then help them, right, move towards a more sustainable production on whatever they feel they work on. And then, of course, keep on our work with our customers. And we're very proud that we have encouraged a lot of our clients into committing to the science-based targets. So we're there collaborating with them as well.
Thank you, Veronica, and also just the net zero by 2030 commitment, again 20 years ahead of what Paris would suggest. The more fundamental cultural change in consumption, a huge thing to put in place. But the theme that I thought you really hit on very nicely is this point about cooperation and collaboration across the value chain, thinking through how you actually achieve these goals, and that'll be a theme I suspect that we'll pick up over the course of today's session. Francesco, I'd love to turn to you. Not as small a company as some of the others, but nonetheless an equally daunting challenge. Tell us.
Thank you, Manish. Thank you. Yes, we are quite large, I would say. We're a very large utility in many points of view in terms of millions of customers. We have more than 70 million customers around the world. By the way, we are in Brazil, we are in Chile, and we are in India. So we covered this panel, okay? And we have a lot of generation. We come from a past of thermal generation and hydro generation, and started a big journey in renewable energy growth in pretty early in the years. And now I can say that because of that dimension, we have been looking at substituting our thermal generation worldwide, retiring it and putting in renewable generation to keep the lights on, obviously. And this is a process that has been ongoing now since several years. Last 2019 was the first year in which our installed capacity in renewables matched the thermal generation that we had in our legacy assets. And we are today the largest privately owned renewable energy player worldwide, and also the one that grows faster than anybody else. Every year, we add capacity which beats our own record of the previous year. Every year, this acceleration keeps going on. However, last year, during the COVID, we established an horizon of 10 years and decided that we have to treble our installed capacity in renewables between now and 2030, which means reach 145,000 megawatts of renewable capacity, starting from 49,000, which we had at the end of 2020. So that is a big effort, and it's coupled with an incredible investment in our networks, because without efficient and reliable distribution networks, all this transition will not happen. To enable efficient electrification of decarbonized electricity reaching customers worldwide. We have about 74 million customers connected to our networks worldwide. And we're investing a lot, about 65 billion euros in these 10 years just on the networks to keep them growing as we all need. We started the SBTi target journey among the first in 2015. This was when we established that by 2020, so last year, we would have had to reduce our specific emissions of greenhouse gas per kilowatt hour produced by 25%. And we reached that goal a year before, in 2019. So we revised this target putting a big emphasis on the pathway to 1.5. This was recently put down by the SBTI initiative. And we committed to reduce our emissions by 2030 by a factor of 80% when compared to the 2017 emissions, which were already pretty low. Why that? Why we did that? Because it will take a little longer than what we heard from Roberto and Veronica to get to zero carbon for us. We have a target for 2050, which is far, and we said that's great, but we need to have something close by, and 2030 is enough to commit to and to focus people on and to really push this change. And I think the SBTI initiative was the great tool we had to really focus all our efforts on scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 in order to get there on the 3 dimensions by the 2030. I believe this was a great journey. It's a great tool to have. And it also showed how we can do this if we work together with all our suppliers and contractors, and also those like Triciclos that help us in different countries, which, Veronica, I'm happy you mentioned that because we work together pretty well on that. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, the story of different stories for different companies, yet some themes are quite common across the companies. The point around cooperation, the point around also all of you, what has been quite impressive is, 10 years ago, the conversation was companies taking steps forward to address this issue, but not sure how much to do. And just over the past few years, all of your companies having gone from, what might be a 2-degree pathway, but really now to embracing what the science requires, and in some cases even exceeding, and showing that this can be done ahead of schedule, not because you're all generous, good-natured people, which you are, but because it also makes, very, very good business sense. Shabnam, I'd love to turn to you. A slightly different organization, UN Global Compact Network in India. Tell us a little bit more about the story in India and of your organization.
So thank you for that, Manish, and greetings, everyone. It is truly inspiring to hear from leaders who have walked the talk. And it's my personal honor to be sharing this platform with all of you. Global Compact needs no introduction, at least to this panel, in terms of what we do, how we are doing it. I've been with the Global Compact Network India for the last 10 years, a decade at the Compact, and usually in earlier positions that we work, especially in the sector that I'm working in, in 5, 6, 7 years, there's kind of a fatigue that comes in, and then you want to change and move to someone else or somewhere else. But Global Compact, if you see the journey, it's been fascinating, especially because of leaders like you, businesses like you, both globally and in India. 10 years ago, when I joined the Global Compact, there were a lot of whys. So when we're talking about the 10 principles, why should companies come on board? What is the need? And that why has now turned to how. So not only has the buy-in for the principles as such happened, but especially with the sustainable development goals and having clear targets and indicators, the kind of work that we are doing has become much more direct, much more meaningful, and much more impactful. And within that, within the work that I see is that I personally, in my journey, I've found that businesses, so my core competency is on anti-corruption and transparency. And within the Global Compact, I was and am responsible for the 10th principle. And what I've seen about businesses is they're extremely honest. And so if they make a mistake, and especially within the Global Compact, they'll own up to the mistake because they want to change and they want to go ahead. So I think that kind of incredible journey is what has made India, survive and thrive. We are one of the first networks established with full legal recognition in the year 2004. And our CEOs, the president of the Global Compact at that point, was part of the actual meeting in which Kofi Annan, the then Secretary General, had announced the formation of the Compact. So it's been a long, interesting journey. At the moment, Indian businesses are completely geared up. India Network is also special is because there's a lot of other membership organizations in India. But Global Compact has the maximum number of public sector undertakings, which is huge because the kind of credibility that we enjoy with the public sector undertakings is not very easy. They are extremely cautious because they have to tread a fine line between government diktats and international standards. So that kind of thing we have facilitated. In fact, just yesterday at 10:30 in the night, I got a random message from one of the vigilance compliance officers of a very big extractive industry saying that there has been some complaint that has come, a human rights issue that they are facing, and this is what they have done. Have they done it correct, or do they need to change? So, we took them around as to what needs to be done, and the very fact that they are sharing this is also an indication that they want to change. And with that kind of a relationship with businesses, I'm pretty confident that as we forge ahead with the new strategy of the Global Compact, which we have just launched this year, and all the action platforms, and especially the climate ambition accelerator that we're talking about, that when businesses have onboarded on this, they are doing it very seriously. They want to make a change. And if they are committed, if the leadership is committed, then I'm sure India will be showing great results in the years to come. I'm happy to assist in the journey. I'm a great proponent of collective action, because only together we can and together we will. We have relationships, excellent working relationship with the government, because businesses and government is a relationship that cannot be understated. We have relationships with academic institutions, especially business schools, because that is where the next generation change makers will be coming from. And of course, civil society and media and other places, because a collective problem will need a collective solution, and Global Compact is there to facilitate this kind of work in India. We are doing it, and I'm quite happy and proud about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shabnam. And very much agree with a lot of what you said, but the point that we're pivoting from a decade that was focused on the why and the what, now to the decade of the how, the decisive decade of delivery in 2020 is incredibly important. But the other really important point you made was the intersection between private companies, government, and the critical role of public sector enterprises or state-owned enterprises, given the very significant environmental and social footprint those institutions have. We need to find ways to bring them on this journey as well. And so your network, your work is exceedingly important in helping make that happen. Roberto, I want to turn back to you. Natura's globally known pinnacle when it comes to many of these issues we care about. Science-Based Targets Initiative, Business Ambition for 1.5 Degrees campaign. Recently, I understand the company raised $1 billion sustainability-linked bond tied to emissions performance and sustainable packaging goals. It'd be great to learn a little bit more about why you did that. What are your plans in terms of emission reductions, how you're thinking about value chain engagement? Just say a few more words.
Yeah, so this was, again, interesting journey, issuing a $1 billion sustainability linked bond tying to concrete measures and achievements, which also on the reduction of carbon emission and also use of recyclable packaging, to the point that if we don't achieve that, we pay a premium. So, which is, again, it's just putting skin in the game and having the entire organization working, also linking those two elements, right? Again, sustainable and economic development. We continue to make the case that those things are reconcilable. I mean, this whole notion that you can actually combine, protecting the environment and sustainability to economic development, I think is a thing of the past. The challenge of the center is actually how we make good business decision at the same time that we're really being very aware and driving to protecting the environment and the planet. Related to emissions, it's interesting, Manish, that again, through science-based, through really data, the direct emissions for us represent about less than 10%. Really the challenge for us is the indirect emission, especially on scope 3, right? Where we have more than 90% of emissions for us. I mean, on the direct emissions, for example, in 2020, Avon achieve 100% of the energy coming out from renewable sources, which is terrific. However, if we need to get to 2030 with net zero, we needed to take care of the entire, upstream and downstream supply chain, and especially the indirect emission, which is the critical component here. And again, through data, we already know that about 75% of our GHG emissions are related to three categories. It's packaging, it's raw material, and logistics. That doesn't make any of that easier for us to solve, but it gives us a clear roadmap where we need to focus, where we needed to find the right partnerships, where do we needed to really increase awareness through our network, through our partners, through our supply chain, to make sure that we can really make progress on those areas. So again, going back to why data, why science-based targets are important, understanding where you are, understanding your inventory of emissions, and then really putting focus on the areas that are really going to move the needle becomes extremely important. For us, we know, and that's why we set our target to become net zero by 2030 on scope 1, 2, and 3, is because we now know that the scope 3, the indirect emissions, is the key offender for us. And unless, again, we bring collectively all of our networks of partners, suppliers on upstream and downstreams, we're not going to be able to get to that target. So knowing where you are, learning, and then establishing the right path forward becomes crucial for us to deliver. And then again, it's the walk the talk. We put a bond in the market where there is clearly targets associated to that will penalize the company and our stakeholders if we don't deliver against those goals.
The critical importance of data to pinpoint where to focus efforts, the critical role of scope 3 for many companies. But I was also struck by the sustainability linked bond and the need to pay a premium if you don't meet your targets. And I think we're starting to see the financial sector now catch up. We're starting to make some commitments. There's some momentum in that space that's going to hopefully catch up with some of what you're showing them through the work that you're all doing. So Veronica, Triciclos has the mission to change the concept of waste. The linear economic model of extracting, transforming, consuming, discarding is one of the reasons for our current environmental challenges. What are some of the climate-related challenges of waste management? How will you address these challenges? How will you meet your 2030 target?
Thank you, Manish. Yeah, well, it's interesting because to resolve the problem of waste, we also emit, right? We create emissions. But let me focus on the first part that you mentioned, which is the problems of this linear economy, right? So our economy is based on a mismanage of limited, scarce, non-renewable natural resources. And for me as an engineer, it makes no sense, right? So we really need to focus on that. We really need to focus on stop capturing carbon from nature and sending it back to nature in ways that it's harmful to our ecosystem, right? Either free to the atmosphere or encapsulated inside landfills or whatever, right? So this really makes no sense, and we should focus on that. Of course, we now do one part of a business, right? It's very focused on recyclable waste management, which has its own challenges, right? You're trying to resolve an issue, but at the same time, you are creating a lot of emissions in the recycling processes and in the logistic processes. So where you're trying to move your trucks throughout cities to landfills or to recycling plants. Whatever you do, you are, of course, creating processes that should be designed better. So that there is where I want to make an emphasis in our approach towards waste. So in Triciclos, we believe that waste is a design error. So it's in designing process where the biggest part of the solution then relies on. In fact, 80% of the environmental impact of a particular product can be corrected while designing it. If we consider these variables, right? And not only the satisfaction that needs to cover this product, but also the environmental aspects of the product once we produce them and once we deliver it, right? So we were talking about scope 3, we're talking about those indirect impacts that our products generate in the moment that they are consumed or even after that. So we need to incorporate those aspects into the designing process. So we in Triciclo help a lot in understanding those impacts, in helping other companies design out waste while they're doing it. Helping, for example, what was mentioned earlier. So Natura makes products, sells them in a particular way, right? So can we sell or satisfy those same needs for their customers in a way that they generate a less environmental impact? Because of course, there are a lot of aspects that you have to analyze, right? The way you produce your product, but also the way that you send it to your customer is as relevant as the other aspects. So what we're doing now, we're very focused on providing digital solutions for our customers to control and improve first, recyclability of their packaging, which is important, but there are other aspects that could be solved through other solutions that are not recyclability. So either compostable or even get out of the single-use packaging, even if it's recyclable or compostable, and move into other aspects of circularity, which are, and where we are focusing right now a lot, it's on refillable solutions, for example, for home care products. And also now that the delivery industry is so much useful probably than before with the COVID-19 and everything and all the shutdowns, but we're helping that industry to implement a returnable approach towards packaging or whatever is delivered. Because if we go back, when we understand the focus on the sources of emissions, and there's an interesting study published a couple of years ago from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that I'm sure you all read, but if we want to tackle this problem, half of it comes from Enel, right? Half of it comes from energy. And of course, and a bit more than half, probably 55% comes from there. And it's a big issue to cover. But then the rest of it, and probably it's the harder part of it, you need to tackle it through other approaches. And circular economy is the way to move towards a zero emission way of consuming, of producing and consuming. So when we're talking about products, when we're talking about buildings, when we're talking about all the other things that are surrounding us, you need to incorporate the circular approach where you actually eliminate the concept of waste, and you incorporate as well a concept of you need to use efficiently whatever natural resource that you take out of nature. And if you are going to send it back to nature, send it back in a way that is regenerative. Someone mentioned before, regeneration. It's super important. And not only because it's the way of things to go back to nature in a non-harmful way, but also because we're in 2021, we are arriving to limits. So it's not enough to just don't pollute, don't create a negative impact. What we need to do now is create a positive impact, and regeneration, it's all about that.
Thank you, Veronica. It reminds me, Mark Twain once said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure, but ain't so." And so I think really re-examining kind of our initial assumptions about how things need to be and reimagining how you think about design. I mean, your story there is very much about re-examining those assumptions that go into how we look at business today in ways that I think unleash a lot more creativity and innovation. Francisco, I'd love to turn to you. As you mentioned, Enel was one of the first companies to join SBTI in 2015. You talked a little bit more about the upgraded ambition of your targets last year. Want to just hear a little bit more about your experience in setting and validating those targets, and what are some of the main messages for the corporate sector, particularly for large companies, about participating in SBTI?
First of all, I think SBTI is not rocket science. So people should not be afraid of the word science that is right there. It's something that helps companies quantify their progress towards a certain goal. And it is managed in a scientific way, which means an objective third-party manner, so that people cannot cheat with it. And then they are rather scrutinized in their way in which this is progressing. Why I think this is important? Because we're all human beings, and you know, our colleagues, people working in companies, they want to know what progress is made into the direction in which the company is going. And I think there is a big motivation factor behind the success that we had when we started this journey. You know, when Roberto mentioned the SDG linked bond, you know, we invented the SDG linked bonds a few months before Natura, and that was the first time that, you know, the bond market, which is not the most innovative, I would say, environment, was pretty surprised. But the simple idea that, you know, you commit to do something and you link the return on the interest rate on the bond on the fact that you reach that's something. But this only works if that is something that can be certified and measured. So this is, I always used to say this, the boring part of sustainability, but without it, the whole thing falls apart. So it's really super important that companies look at SBTI as a tool, as an important tool, because it is measuring their progress and giving their own employees a way of understanding how well things are progressing. And I can tell you, you know, one of the most powerful forces companies have within their own ranks is the motivation of their employees. And we know that people mostly agree on the sustainability targets and the sustainability development goals. So they're happy to see that the company is committing to them. But they want to know whether their efforts are doing something positive or negative, and how does it work. So I think it's very powerful tool. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. Study it a little bit. It's possible, and it pays back in a big way.
Thank you very much. And it builds on Roberto's point around data, but now it's also about the standards, the metrics to use to measure progress. That matters. And I think the other point you made, which was quite important, is, you know, in the war around attracting and retaining talent for business, finding ways to keep your employees motivated, excited, doing things that align with their values, with the company's values, incredibly important. So that was a really important point as well. Shabnam, you talked a lot about the UN Global Compact and kind of global compact local networks like yours, helping companies understand what responsible business means, facilitating learning, collective action partnerships, as you talked about so eloquently in your opening remarks. So what's next? Where does the UN Global Compact local network in India go next? What's next looking forward for the coming years?
Thank you, Manish, for that question. I think just to give a quick background for, especially for the case in India, that in India, when the country announced the National Action Plan on Climate Change in June 2008, we were just one of the 10 odd countries in the world to have a consolidated policy instrumental to tackle climate change. So we had a good policy. We had an action plan of around 8 verticals and sectors. But a decade down the line, major learning has been that while policy is good roadmap for intervention, what we really need is implementation and the commitment of resources to make it happen. And it connects with the earlier speaker when we talk about that kind of commitment and that kind of evaluation. If it's not quantifiable, then it leaves a lot to understand. And learning from the challenges of our ecosystem partners, what we are trying to do at the Global Compact Network India is that we understand that such kind of commitment and implementation and out of the box thinking is best done by businesses, and especially Global Compact businesses. So India, what we have done is we are following a 4-step approach to climate action, as we call it. The first approach that we look at is policy intervention, because policy, I am a student of public policy myself, and we realize what we have done is we have linked climate to biodiversity, because we believe that the world cannot meet its climate action goals without restoring ecosystems and their carbon stores. And the decade of ecosystem restoration that was launched just last week presents an opportunity to really scale up our business ambitions, especially for marine and coastal areas. So we are working on policy intervention. The strategy that we are following for this is collective action, which I think I cannot repeat enough. This collective action with businesses leading the entire domain, because they're very focused on commitment to targets. Governments, we have sought for support and guidance, so that whenever we do recommendations to the government, there is early buy-in for those. We have onboarded ecosystem and academic partners for guiding, documenting, and advising the group from time to time. And we're also hoping to invite other UNGC local networks as observers, so we can learn and grow from each other. We talked about that any kind of change, so with targets, with great ambitions, eventually it does boil down to behavior, and behavioral change for any UNGC principle or SDG goal is extremely crucial. So for the climate action also, we are looking at mass outreach through campaigns, working with business schools especially, because and maybe have some kind of competitions or with them, and engaging extensively with innovators, influencers, and change makers, because this eclectic group is what will the kind of volleys that climate is throwing at us, especially with the pandemic, is something beyond comprehension and understanding. So we really need this eclectic team to think beyond the set horizons. And finally, the Climate Ambition Accelerator that we have just launched last month, and we are onboarding businesses, I think, to the 3rd week of this month. India is part of the Climate Ambition Accelerator, and echoing the words of Sanda, our executive director, what we feel is that the new Climate Accelerator enables more companies in the local networks to join the transition to a net zero and get started in setting ambitious, credible, and science-based targets. The need of it has already been discussed. Ambitious businesses leaders are recognizing that taking climate action is the best way to build healthier communities, consumers, and economies. And as we build back better from the pandemic, the private sector especially has a key role to play in sending strong market signals and scaling innovative solutions to present concrete, realistic plans towards a zero carbon economy. I believe that the plans we set today are worth more than commitments promised in the future, especially as risks associated with the pace and extent of climate action are escalating exponentially. So whatever we need to do, whatever we plan to do, we have to start now. There's no better time than that. And that is what, at the Global Compact Network India, we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shabnam. Very, very exciting. This has been an incredibly rich discussion. We only got a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to give you all a chance for one final intervention, a short kind of insight, epiphany message you'd like to leave with the audience. You're all kind of leading lights in the climate and sustainability world for the business community. What is the kind of one insight you would like to share with the rest of us? Roberto, I'll start with you.
So first, thank you all for this very insightful and always inspiring panel. Thank you all for your collaborations. And listen, I'll probably even three, very brief thoughts. One, again, as we discussed, I don't think it's a choice between business growth and protecting environment. I think we all need to reflect that those things needs to be reconciled, and we need to really, drive with the mindset of, driving growth and protecting the environment. Two, I think as we talk about it, this notion of collective and collaboration and cooperation between public sector, private sector, civil society, how we engage our supplier, our entire ecosystem, how we engage our customers. And I always say, let's not forget, customers are citizens. Sometimes we always refer to customers and consumers. They are citizens. They want to be engaged. So if we help them understanding how to consume our products, how to recycle, how to think about, circularity, they will engage. So it's up to us also to make sure that we engage customers as citizens as well. And my last point is we need to actually embrace this plan A. There is no plan B, right? We can run business in a dead planet. So there is no alternative. So we might as well embrace science-based targets. We might as well be disciplined we might as well be held accountable against those targets, because I don't think there is an alternative. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great. Really, really pithy. Thank you, Veronica.
Couldn't agree more with Roberto. We need to, of course, and this sounds obvious, but we need to measure. There are plenty of tools, not only the SBTI, you have from a very technical point of view, life cycle analysis, environmental footprints, but also the SDG Action Manager that can bring you a view of other aspects that are as relevant as these ones. We need to collaborate all around the value chain. Of course, we shouldn't be afraid to innovate. And as Roberto mentioned, our clients, our citizens are empowered to make changes as well, cultural changes. But one thing that Francesco sort of mentioned before that for me is that I've seen as very important with our clients. You need to bring this to the culture of your own company. This is not going to, you're not going to be able to create these changes if you don't incorporate all of these aspects into the culture of your own company. So inside of business, bringing sustainability to the core of your business and into your strategy. Don't make a parallel strategy for sustainability. Bring sustainability to your strategy and incentivize your people. Create the correct, right, organizational structure and communication in order to support our own teams into achieving this. Because if we don't do so, it's going to be much harder and probably much longer than it's actually feasible. So I will encourage for that.
Thank you. Measurement matters, and integrate sustainability into the core of your business. Francesco.
I always forget I'm on mute. I think, this is the decade of doing, as you just said. It's also easy to measure what we're doing, as we just said also. So think about yourself in 2030 and look back and try to avoid regret. Try to avoid to feel inadequate because in 2021, you did not push the accelerator, but the brakes. You did not go at it, but timidly at it or waited for that. It's time to do it. There is no question about it. If you don't do this now, my dear colleagues, in 2030, you will regret it.
Powerful, just really, really powerful about where we need to be in 2030, 9 years away. Shabnam.
I think for me, the one key takeaway is hope. And the one action that we need to do is start now, wherever we are in the journey. And usually I am a perfectionist at work in the sense that, we wait for the perfect moment, perfect whatever. But I've also realized that best cannot be the enemy of good, which sometimes happens as people get paralyzed with a challenge as they see it. especially in the post-pandemic world, where no matter who we are and where we belong, we all got directly and indirectly affected by it. And with hope, I think the next step that we need to do is seek knowledge, dream again, set ambitious target with a focused roadmap, of course, and reach out for support. All our organizations put together can and are meant to make a positive difference in the world. Just that we have to start the journey without delay and ensure that collective action enhances the journey. Then no target, I think, will be unachievable. So I end with hope, my key takeaway from this.
Thank you, Shabnam. And I'm just going to close with a very quick story that builds on what many of you have said. Some of you may have heard about this man who was walking to work, and he came across a construction site, and he saw a number of people working at the construction site. And so he asked the first person, "What are you doing?" And the person looked at him and said, "I'm laying bricks." So the man kept on walking, came across the second person, said, "What are you doing?" The person said, I'm building a wall." Interesting. And the man kept on working to work and came across another person, said, "What are you doing?" He looked into the sky and he said, I'm building a cathedral or a temple or a mosque. And the point being that vision, that ambition around what we can do, your point about hope, Shabnam, just is what I think all four of you have been doing. You've imagined something much greater than what might have seemed possible. And in so doing, made the business case and made the sustainability case in ways that I think are inspiring so many others. So with that, a huge thanks to all of you and to the entire audience for joining us on this exceedingly important conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, John.